your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. You'll notice this morning that my sermon is being recorded for my course at Lindisfarne. So please do laugh at the jokes, make reassuring nods and noises so that my tutor knows how well it went. You can start recording now. Oh, you already have?
Yes.
Sorry. Today I'll be sharing thoughts in my sermon from Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth that we heard read beautifully by Audrey this morning. Paul, following his conversion, which we celebrated on the 25th of January, spent the rest of his ministry in the service of God. In his 4 journeys, his 4th to Rome, where he was eventually killed for his faith, he established and supported by his letters and his presence many burgeoning Christian communities. One of these was a church at Corinth, the Corinthians. This church was to give him great joy and great suffering, which can be read about in his 2 letters to the Corinthians. In the book of Acts and in Paul's letters, we get a snapshot of his life and the early Christian communities. This is part of the photo album that we share about Paul's life and ministry. If I ask you today where you came from, what would you say? Would you bring out photo albums? Maybe you have keepsakes you would use to tell your story. Maybe you're into genealogy and can tell me the story of your family name back several generations. My dad, in his retirement, has spent some time doing genealogy, although he hasn't been able to go that far back. But he has found a distant relative in Canada to whom he has shared heritage. For me, though, the one picture that sticks in my mind is of my paternal nana and my maternal granddad as young children who grew up together in the same village with a shared grandparent. Their dads were brothers. This image is part of who I am and tells a part of the story of my family. I also have albums at home that Emma put together, my wife, that show our lives and childhood from before we met. And this, along with our wedding album and photo albums of our family, show my life and my story. And even on my phone, I just had a quick look before the service, and I've got photos all the way back from 2003 that just bring back memories of who I was and who I am and how I've come to be here now. Last Sunday was Holocaust Memorial Day, when we remember the atrocities done to the Jews during the Second World War. We must also remember the Armenian Holocaust of around 1915, which is told beautifully in the 2016 film, The Promise. Both of these events are part of the journey and life of the Jews and Armenian Christians, and are retold and passed on so that it will never be forgotten. Their story is written in many books so that it can be passed on, unchanging. This is part of their story and part of their identity. As Christians, wherever we have come from, whatever our own personal story is, and however dysfunctional we may feel we are, please don't worry. As Lewis reminded us last week, we are united in love, as dysfunctional as we are. This love is expressed in our creeds, and this makes up our common story. In a moment, we will stand united together with Christians across the world to recite the Apostles' Creed. And this sums up our Christian story and sets out the themes and beliefs on which our story is built. Just like all stories build up to the best bits, the climax, so do our creeds. The Apostles' Creed reaches its climax in affirming our belief in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. The Nicene Creed speaks confidently of looking for and expecting the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. However, a creed is far more than just a story. It is a statement of a shared belief by a community which is built around a fixed formula of core beliefs or tenets. In our letter this morning, Paul is writing to the church in Corinth and reminding them of their shared history. It is an album of sorts that explains and reminds them of their history, of their family, which stretches from Jesus through the apostles and to Paul, the least of the apostles, and finally to the church at Corinth. Within it, he gives them a creed to remember, which he is clear to present to them as unchanged and passed on from those who first witnessed it. St. Paul, of course, is known as a prolific writer and traveller who shared the good news wherever he went. The first letter to the Corinthians has been prompted by several questions and concerns that have come to St. Paul, and throughout the first chapters we see him repeatedly stating, "Now concerning." Our passage this morning, though, does not start in such a way, but concerns have been raised with St. Paul about the Corinthians' interpretation of the resurrection of Christ and of the dead, which is dealt with in the later verses of chapter 15. I imagine that St. Paul is rolling his eyes, taking a deep breath before he launches into his response. After all, this is a key tenet of the Christian faith, and St. Paul reminds them that it is of first importance. Without the resurrection of Christ, there will be no gospel of good news and no church. They need to get it right, just as we do now. The Corinthians have been relying on their own piety. They believed they had it right and had started to develop their own personal spirituality, which has led them into some very unmoralistic pursuits, which Paul's letter discusses in the preceding chapters. But as his letter is coming to an end, so he comes to the climax of what he wants to tell them and remind them. In today's world, we can easily get distracted by false piety and personal spirituality. Maybe the pushing of mindfulness has caused us to rely less on Christ, or to smudge the boundaries between what is apostolic, what is truthful and passed on. The climax of our faith, and what we need to hold on to is, as summarised by St. Paul in his creed, that Christ died for our sins, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day. This has been passed down to us, the kerygma, or proclamation that was seen, as Paul tells us, by Cephas, or St. Peter, then the 12 disciples, then more than 500 other people, then James, then the other apostles, then Paul himself. This is the same message that has continued to be shared and passed down to us, and soon we will reaffirm it and share our belief in the Apostles' Creed, proclaiming that Jesus was crucified, died and was buried. He descended to the dead, and on the third day he rose again. The Corinthians had heard the good news proclaimed by Paul and received it. They may have confused the message, but they have received it. I know, with teenagers in the house, that often the message is heard, but certainly not received, and things remain undone. I also know that as a husband, or maybe a man, I'm not sure, that I'm guilty of the same things. I hear, but I don't necessarily receive, and things are left undone. And I'm sure that, as I look out to you, you can probably agree with this. And some of you may have some very recent examples that you could share. But the Corinthians had heard and had received. They just lost their way a little and confused the message, as they heard ideas from others. We are all Christians, and through our baptism, we have the primary vocation to share the good news that Christ died for our sins, was buried, and raised on the third day. But what message do we give by the life we lead? Do we live each day in the assurance through Christ's death and resurrection, He was saved, He has saved us and made us free? Last time I preached, I challenged us to live the life we profess, just as Asia Bibi did. And today, I think that the message I want to take away and challenge myself with is to remember that when I share the good news, which is what we are all called to do through our baptism, that the message I give through my life doesn't confuse the message, that message of the good news, so that the good news can be heard and received. It's a big task, and not an easy one, and at times can lead to arguments, but it is our primary calling, and as Paul reminds us, is of the first importance, to remind people that Christ died for our sins, that He was buried, and that He was raised on the third day. This is the same message that was proclaimed in the Old Testament scriptures, and that has been passed down through the generations to the first Christians, to us, and it is now our vocation to pass it on unchanged. As I come to a close, let me now remind myself and us all that Paul started out in persecuting the church, persecuting Jesus. Yet Jesus still called him to be an apostle, although in Paul's words he was unfit to be called an apostle and to spread the good news. Paul knew that it was a grace of God that worked through him when he shared the good news. That same grace lives in each one of us. And God, when we hear and receive His word, works through us. Let us then, when we hear the words, "Whom shall I send?" just as Isaiah did in our first reading, we reply confidently, "Here am I, send me." In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.